Morning everyone. My name's Jason Lewis. These days I run a small investigative practice, International Insight, based here in London. But for 20 years I was a newspaper reporter on UK nationals. Amongst other things, I was chief investigative reporter on the Mail on Sunday, and following 9/11 became the paper's security editor. I then moved to the Sunday Telegraph, where I was investigations editor, leading a team of reporters. And then about 6-7 years ago, I left journalism to run what's loosely called a business intelligence company, or help run business intelligence inquiries for clients, mainly lawyers and large companies. However, in some ways I still regard myself a journalist because, albeit an unpublished one, I still draw on the same techniques and skills that I learned as a reporter. We try and, my company tries to provide journalistic style research for our clients and draws on an international network of like-minded people that form the backbone of our inquiries. And pretty much we like to sort of try to put together verifiable information for our clients, try to steer away from rumour and innuendo, and do things that, even if we don't want them to be in the public domain, if they were, I don't think we would be, that worried about it. Maybe our clients might, but our inquiries, hopefully, the information's verifiable. Several years ago, I was called in to help investigate what's become known as the Football League's hack. These inquiries have kind of, in some ways, put me on the other side of the fence from quite a lot of my former journalistic colleagues, including several of my friends, and that's obviously led to kind of some interesting debates over a beer or two. But make no bones about it, I was out to out their source. It was a strange situation, although to be honest, as it went on, not really one that's given me any misgivings. During my career, I dealt with lots of whistleblowers. I was involved back in the day with former MI5 officer, David Shayler, who was pursued for breaches of the Official Secrets Act for the information he passed to us. Another source of mine leaked financial records from the Metropolitan Police that exposed how the taxpayer was funding the security of former Prime Minister's lucrative business trips. But that source was prosecuted and thankfully acquitted by a jury. However, the source behind these leaks, these and other sources like Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden and Catherine Gunn were insiders who came across what they considered to be wrongdoing in the course of their jobs and took a considered and brave decision that the public had a right to know and leaked the information that they uncovered. For me, however, hackers unconnected to and with no legitimate access to the information that they're disseminating are an altogether different category. And more often than not, these individuals are motivated not by some moral obligation to do the right thing, whatever the cost to them personally, but by greed, often stealing cash or resorting to extortion. So in 2015, a series of leaked documents began to appear on the internet on a newly created blog, footballleaks.livejournal.com, exposing some of international football's best-kept secrets. At first, the revelations emerged slowly. Among these were third-party agreements involving Dutch club Twente, is that how you say it? Undisclosed details of star striker Falcao's 43 million transfer to Monaco, Brazilian star Neymar's 8.5 million signing on fee at Barcelona, and his 190 million buyout clause. By the first week of October 2015, the Football Leaks blog had posted 30 times, each containing details of confidential files related to football deals. While these stories made headlines on the back pages of various newspapers, behind the scenes there was widespread consternation among the lawyers, agents and football clubs involved in these deals. Where was this information coming from? Private, client, confidential, financially sensitive? Where was it from? The geographical spread of the revelations and the number of clubs and advisors involved, it was likely that whoever was leaking this information must have had access to the background files at a number of different locations. So a hunt for the leaker was on. Was it, they asked, a disaffected employee? Was it a business rival attempting to undermine them? So, as I say, I was asked to get involved, and it was around about October 2015 when one of the international businesses whose confidential information had been leaked called in some cyber experts to try and find out what was going on. The experts quickly assessed that an unknown hacker had gained remote access to the client's computers from an IP address in Hungary. It was not clear when the first breach occurred, but once inside the client's systems, the hacker gained access to all its incoming, outgoing emails and confidential attachments, sending them to an email address hosted in Russia. The idea that it was a hacker kind of emerged quite slowly, really, because most companies believe their networks are secure, that no one could simply, with a few mouse clicks, get access to all the secrets. But in this case, it became clear that that was precisely what happened. The people that they asked to investigate this had spent their careers basically in intelligence, working for governments, trying to protect governments' networks from cyber attacks from foreign powers. And they quickly saw that there were several flaws in the security of some of the football-related businesses' systems, and that's how the leaker had got in. Further analysis showed that this unauthorized individual had gained access, and they were able to identify precisely where the IP address in Hungary that had been used to access it was. And then we were trying to work out, well, who was it in Hungary that was trying to, who had an interest in trying to get access to our client and the other companies involved, and, why were they doing it? The first known contact with a hacker was made on the 3rd of October, and there followed an email exchange that lasted until around about the 17th of October. The hacker used an email address, Artem Lubazov, at Yandex.kz to contact the football agent, to contact one of the football agents involved. The email said that the hacker was in possession of large amounts of the agent's information and asked for 500,000 euros for its safe return. As the email exchange continued, the hacker introduced his Portuguese-based lawyer, a guy called Anibal Pinto, and provided his contact details to continue the discussions. On the 6th of October, the last of 30 posts were made on the footballleaks.livejournal.com. It was at around this time that the agent and his lawyer approached the Portuguese police and reported the attempt of extortion. Police opened an investigation into the incident, and they encouraged the agent to keep up his communication with the hacker and his lawyer, Anibal Pinto. Efforts were made to seek information from Yandex, the company behind the email account that was being used, regarding details of the email accounts that were being used in the extortion. But that failed because Yandex refused to disclose any information. And the forensic analysis of the agent's computers also suggested that it may have been victims of a so-called spear phishing attack, often used by cyber criminals to target individuals or companies. This sort of attack sees an email arrive apparently from a trustworthy source, but instead it leads the unknown recipient to a bogus website full of malware. These emails often use clever tactics to get the victim's attention. So the agent and his lawyer met Anibal Pinto in a petrol station forecourt in Lisbon. The meeting was under surveillance by the Portuguese police, and the conversation, we believe, was recorded by the Portuguese police. During this conversation, Anibal stated that he knew the hacker personally, that he'd been previously involved in a hack of a Cayman Islands bank. Told us that he was a really good hacker and really, really kind of good at his job. Also Anibal stated that the hacker was not based in Portugal, and now he asked for a fee of 300,000 euros for the return of the documents that his client had got. At the beginning of November, Anibal Pinto contacted the agent's lawyer again via an SMS message asking for the contract to be agreed. The agent's lawyer informed the Portuguese police. Police informed the agent's lawyer that they were dealing with several instances of hacking and extortion, which they were believed to be related. And they also confirmed that they had a chief suspect who was based abroad, but would not disclose who the individual was. They said their plan was to use Anibal Pinto to lure the hacker back to Portugal, where they could arrest him. The agent and other targets of the hack took legal action to remove the Football League's livejournal.com site, but it was immediately replaced by a new WordPress blog and another based in Russia. At the same time, attempted cyber attacks continued from an unidentified source in Budapest against several football-related businesses. So we carried out searches in Portugal, basically looking for cases that involved Anibal Pinto to see whether he'd been involved with any other hackers. And it revealed that in 2013, he had represented a young student, Rui Pedro Gonzalez Pinto, who was accused of hacking into the accounts and stealing money from a bank in the Cayman Islands. This, to us, corroborated the information volunteered by Anibal Pinto during the Petrol Station Forecourt meeting on the 21st of October. We quickly understood that Rui Pinto, born in October 1998, that he grew up in this terraced house in a working class area near Porto, and we went there and found he wasn't living there, that his neighbours said that he'd left the area several years ago, that unfortunately his mother had passed away when he was young, and that he'd studied history at the University of Porto but didn't graduate. A key finding, bizarrely, was that he was into trance music, and also that he was a very, very passionate fan of Porto Football Club. The court records also showed that he had a history involvement in several violent incidents. In 2010, he was involved in a fight on a city centre bus at 2 a.m, in which the driver accused Pinto of assaulting another passenger. In 2011, he was the alleged victim of another attack where he claimed to have been set on by 4 men and 4 women, but he failed to show up for a medical examination, and the case was dropped. So we sort of believe now we'd found our man, that this was the guy that we were looking for. Caledonian Bank hack court records showed us that the police had been examining the transfer of more than 250,000 euros from an account held in the Caledonian Bank in their branch in the Cayman Islands to an account in Porto at Deutsche Bank in Rui Pinto's name, and it had been opened in March 2012. Before the first suspicious transfer of 34,627 euros on the 19th of September 2013 from an unknown source, the account contained just 31.67 euros and had been used on a regular basis to buy tickets for the Porto Metro and to pay Pinto's mobile phone telephone bill. However, 2 days after the account received this large amount of money, Pinto made a cash withdrawal of 981 euros. No additional cash was paid in during the period. This suggested that either Pinto planned to go overdrawn or he knew that he was withdrawing some of the money that he'd received from the Cayman Islands bank transfer. This here is the statement from Pinto's bank account, and that's available in the court records in the courts in Portugal. The majority of the suspect money from this hack, more than 227,000 euros, came in a second transfer on the 11th of October 2013, again arranged using a computer that we ascertained, or the police had discovered, was based at the University of Porto. And the money came from a fiduciary account used by pilots working for a company called NetJets, who are a private aircraft charter company. The target account contains large sums to enable crews to refuel its planes around the world. Court records show that Pinto was officially classified as the accused and retained Porto law firm Annabel Pinto and Associates. One of the firm's advocates, another of the firm's advocate, was the main contact on the case, writing letters on Rui Pinto's behalf, including one in which Pinto complained that he would not be able to attend court as he could not afford to travel to Lisbon, where the case was going to be heard. Rio Pinto appeared to have actively selected the firm from a list of named firms rather than it being appointed to him by the court. And court papers, or one that, because in Portugal the judge could have appointed an advocate if he didn't have a lawyer already. The papers showed that Pinto had previously been listed in 4 other criminal cases in the Porto courts. We mentioned some of those assault cases and whatever, and that the cash that was wired to Rui Pinto's account from NetJets was returned to the company on the 21st of October 2013. However, the remaining earlier transfer of €33,711.67 remained in his account. The Lisbon-based lawyers for the Caledonian Bank later confirmed that the case had been settled in October 2014 after Pinto returned half of this money, €17,313,000, but leaving him half the cash from the original transfer. According to the lawyers, the bank were keen to settle to avoid embarrassment due to the lack of evidence, and also they said due to the lack of evidence that Pinto himself had initiated the transfers. One of the NetJet staffers, who happened to be called Pinto as well, believed that he'd been targeted by Rio Pinto because of his surname, and the two weren't related. I think Pinto's a very common name in Portugal, he believed that Rui Pinto had gained access to the company's servers and found an email containing the password and other information needed to access and transfer money from the bank's online account. He told us that what happened was that he and a colleague from the US had access to the fiduciary account belonging to the pilots, and a lot of what they did on a day-to-day basis was authorize pilots to claim from the account. But he said the hacker had accessed the account through an online banking system and that the company had never used, and he explained, we never used the online system as there was never any need to use it. Everything usually went via email with 2 signatures from ourselves and the signature from the pilot drawing the funds. So the first we became aware of the problem was when he was called at midnight by the company's CFO in the US and asked why he'd authorised the withdrawal of €200,000. He responded that he really wasn't sure, and that he had no idea how this had happened. He said what transpires was that, he said he found this from outside sources, that Rui Pinto had hacked into the account, and the worrying thing, he said, was because of his surname, the in-house lawyers might think that he'd actually something to do with it. He said that thankfully his kid's name wasn't Rui, because otherwise he didn't know what would have happened. He recalled that he heard that the money had been sent to a Portuguese branch of Deutsche Bank, as we already said, and there followed a few tense days as he argued to get the money frozen, and in return pressurising the bank and telling it the money was stolen. He said that at a university, that he'd been told that a university server had been used to hack the accounts, and that the last he had heard was that the guy had left Portugal behind the attack and gone to work in Budapest. He said the smaller initial transfer into Pinto's account was not linked to NetJets, but the battle to get the larger payment from the company stopped had been fraught with difficulty, mainly because of the lack of support from the Portuguese police, who he said had very few officers with technical ability to help, and told him that the money, and because the money had been returned, they would close the case. He was also told that the resources had been, that the very few cyber-savvy officers that the Portuguese police had been assigned to another investigation involving the former Portuguese Prime Minister. He said it took about 9 months before he was actually interviewed by the Portuguese police. 9 months after they'd reported the whole thing to the bank, and about 2 months. It was about 2 months before I actually got a statement from the police saying the whole thing had been closed. Had it at the time that he faced questions over the coincidence of his surname, but said that Rui Pinto was no relation. He said, it shook me at the time. Everyone looks at you. He had hacked into the account with my username and password. It's one of those things, and Caledonian Bank sent me an email with the password. I put it in one of my folders on my computer with the intention of never having to use it, except in an emergency. And since there was no emergency over the years, I'd never used it. And then, someone came along and accessed it in his account. So we went to Porto University to try and find out what happened to Rui Pinto, and the Faculty of Arts there confirmed that Mr. Pinto had been a history student but had never graduated. A search of the faculty computer system showed that he'd started his 3-year degree course in 2008 and still not completed it in 2013, 5 years later. That was the last year that Mr. Pinto was a Porto student. The record confirmed that he was listed of having moved to study in Budapest. The records gave no information on why he'd not finished his course, and if it was his decision to quit or if he'd been asked to leave. His departure coincided with the police investigation into the hacking of the Cayman Islands Bank. However, the university said that there had been no inquiry from the police, either by the police or internally, into Rui Pinto's alleged use of the university's IP address to hack into these bank accounts. Official at the Faculty of Arts told us that that the case that I was talking to him about had never sparked any kind of investigation. And after checking the files, the official added that there was no reference to anything untoward about Rui Pinto, including any police investigation. So, turned up in Budapest, and we went to various universities there because we weren't sure which one he was at, although we believe we knew because of where the IP address was registered. And the university authorities told us that Rui Pinto was indeed a student registered at Budapest's ELTE University, and that he still had a valid student visa. And that he'd been a regular member of something called the International Meeting Point Group, a student society aimed at expats who were new arrivals in Budapest. However, he'd stopped attending classes, we quickly understood, and he also seemed to have deleted his social media presence. So we could see some sort of early signs of him at the university, and then it all sort of disappeared. But we did in the end use his social media footprint to track him down, because we studied the publicly available material from Students' Union covering the period since Pinto had arrived in Hungary, and sure enough we found Student Union's social media pictures showing him in a group with a group of friends at parties. And so we used search tools that were then available on Facebook, but have since been disabled, to try and map his social media presence and try and understand who his friends were. So, despite his attempts to delete his social media, his new friends, who of course were totally innocent, weren't so cautious and helpfully tagged him on lots of nights out that they had with him. One friend posted a video, an amateur film, of Pinto serving behind the bar of what turned out to be a pub called the Black Sheep in Budapest. We were able to identify this one here. We were able to identify that it was the Black Sheep because of its distinctive green lighting and because it was one of the few bars in Budapest that sold Jägermeister, the German digestif used in Jaeger bombs. Which, if you don't know, it's like when you mix it with Red Bull. And it was a regular hangout for Pinto and his friends. It's believed that he worked there he worked at the bar on a casual basis, although we were told that he was never officially employed there, but it was often somewhere that he hung out and he helped out behind the bar. Another picture showed him during an escape room event. That's the one with the certificate. which someone said, one of his friends said, it was a fabulous international escape, which made us laugh at the time. And he was pictured in that and several other pictures with that group of friends. And we were able to sort of piece together a large group of his network of friends, most of whom were Hungarians, but we were told spoke English for Pinto's benefit. We also found that he was sort of staying in a town outside of Budapest during the summer with one of his friends. So this group became of interest to us because Pinto had sort of dropped off the radar. He wasn't going to lectures, and he wasn't really obviously turning up at anything that we could see. But we started to sort of try and work out what this group of friends were doing, and where they were hanging out. And a key person in this group, and we understood a close friend of Pinto's, was a Hungarian student who often works as an amateur DJ, performing at lots of the university events. And as I said earlier on, it was quite interesting that we discovered that Rui was a trance fan, and I think he and this DJ was kind of a like mind on that. And so what we found was that many of the events that this particular DJ was DJing at, Rui could be seen in the background of pictures and what have you, and was often, we understood, on the guest list, one of the first names on the guest list for many of these events. So we discovered, we basically just kept an eye on what the DJ was doing, and it all sort of came to a head on when the student in question was involved in DJing at an event to mark St. Patrick's Day. So we went along basically to see whether or not Mr. Pinto turned up. And sure enough, he did. It was an ELTE student union event, and Pinto's friend DJ'd, and Pinto again was on the guest list, and he arrived. We were getting a bit worried because he arrived at 11:50 p.m., which is a bit past my bedtime normally, and hung around until 3:20 a.m. when we were all going, is he never going to go home? And he was basically then sort of traced back. We just followed him, worked out where he was living, and then, you know, the usual thing. It was actually not quite as straightforward as that, because there was another occasion where we'd gone to another equally interesting rave, and we lost him about 5 o'clock in the morning, and lots of curses. Anyway, and I think the address that we followed him to was also the address where he was eventually arrested by the Portuguese police sometime later. So, Pinto, as you probably all know, was arrested on the 16th of January this year, and that was 3 years after we traced him in Budapest. And he was arrested, as I said, at the same address that we'd identified and passed on. It's unclear, really, why the Portuguese police took so long to act on the information that had been provided back in 2016. Someone suggested to me that it was to do with the particular Portuguese football clubs that were involved, and that when he got involved with Benfica, it became a bit of an issue. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's what someone said to me. Portuguese prosecutors accused him of aggravated attempts at extortion, illegal access, theft of data from some institutions, including the state itself. He denied these charges and was then extradited to Portugal in March. Subsequently, he's been formally accused of 147 crimes by the Portuguese Public Prosecutor's Office, and he faces 75 charges of illegal access to data, 70 of violation of correspondence, 1 of computer sabotage, and another of attempted extortion. His former lawyer, Annabel Pinto, has also been accused of 1 count of attempted extortion. So Rui Pinto's lawyer claims that the only reason he's behind bars is because it's in Portugal. He says that in Germany, France, England or Italy, Rui would never have been arrested on these charges. Certainly his revelations have had an impact. The leaks exposed Cristiano Ronaldo and Jose Mourinho's tax avoidance, details of the rape allegations against the Portuguese forward. That it's also been used to accuse Man City of violating UEFA's financial fair play regulations. He passed to Spiegel and other members of the journalistic collective, the European Investigative Collaborators, an estimated 70 million documents and 3.4 terabytes of information, including personal emails for some of the sport's most influential figures. He revealed the third-party arrangements involving Twente and football agents, which broke Dutch football association rules, and which led to Twente being banned from European football for 3 years. He leaked details of plans for a European Super League and how the FIFA president was portrayed as having played a central role in negotiations that led to a settlement when Man City and Paris Saint-Germain were accused of breaking the FFP rules. The list goes on, so you can make a pretty good argument for his exposure and what he's done. Personally, and this is a personal opinion. For me, he's not an insider. For all these revelations, he did not simply spot wrongdoing and set out to expose it. That he's been described as a computer genius. In short, he's a hacker. He broke in and stole money from a bank. He broke in and stole documents. He asked for cash for the safe return of these documents, blackmail, as The Guardian described it. So is he a hero, or is he simply a modern-day cat burglar? Some of my journalistic colleagues seek to put Pinto on a par with others like Chelsea Manning and Daniel Hale, who's a former intelligence analyst charged with leaking secrets of the US drone strikes. These leaks have earned shorthand names: the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, WikiLeaks, NSA Files, Swiss Leaks, Lux Leaks. But I wouldn't categorize football leaks along those same lines. Those companies, those other leaks, were about governments and about major issues. We're facing a new breed of vast computerized data drops. And this is something that journalists and the law are struggling to cope with. Pinto's lawyer says that Pinto's a new kind of whistleblower, motivated by indignation, pure and simple, in the sense that he lacks ties to the institutions involved. But he's still exposing wrongdoing. This is what his lawyer says. He describes him as these kind of whistleblowers as coming out of the blue. He also says that he regards Pinto as a cousin of John Doe, who's the whistleblower behind the Panama Papers tax leak, who's been he sort of exposed the secrets of the super rich. But John Doe is anonymous. John Doe's never asked any money for anything. And in this case, Pinto's lawyer says Pinto's a football fan, and he wants to serve the public interest when the public interest has been very, very seriously compromised. Pinto said that he has inside sources, and his approach to those he hacked was to verify information, and that despite asking for it, he never wanted money. He never wanted to do a deal. But given the bank hack, is that credible? To declare someone like Pinto with Chelsea Manning or John Doe covers his activities in some kind of moralistic justification, when in my view the two things are surely at opposite ends of the spectrum. I think journalists, and indeed all of us, need to ask themselves whether we want to live in a world where breaking and entering, albeit by using a computer, is something that we should encourage. When I was a journalist, I would have given anything for the inside papers on people I was investigating. I would have loved to get my hands on former Prime Minister Tony Blair's private correspondence, for example. But would I have been justifiable in sending someone around to break into his home or into his office? So how is it any more justifiable for someone to break in and steal confidential information using a computer just because they can? Because someone left a window open, because there was something wrong with the computer security. So I'm quite proud, actually, of being involved in outing Mr. Pinto, because I think it's not only is Mr. Pinto wrong, but I think the journalists involved in using his material without really knowing much about their source. And if they did know that the guy had a history of hacking, stealing from banks, that they really should really question themselves. That we don't really need to live in a world where all information is available to anybody who just has the means to get it. I think that we need to really, really check ourselves and think that do we want to live like that? Anyway, that's where I'm coming from. And if anyone would like to ask any questions, I'm kind of limited by some client confidentiality, but if anyone wants to talk about anything, I'd be happy to hear. I think he was a loner. I've not seen any evidence of anyone else involved. As for a computer genius, I think the key, I can't talk too much about this particular case, but the key is to look at how he accessed the Caledonian Bank. And he, the guy from NetJet said, our passwords were in emails that were sent to me and that were in my computer. So, that I think is a big clue, really, as to how he operates and whether he's a computer genius or whether or not he's just taking advantage.
I think a distinction has to be made between Pinto and the journalists. Pinto, you've made your case, and I think we are quite probably convinced that there's more to it than what has been said by my colleague Bourdon. But when it comes to journalists and the way they can use that kind of information, this is a fairly complex issue that has given rise to many decisions of the European Court of Human Rights. There's a balance of interest test to be had, and it's far from certain that that is the public interest at stake such that you can use that information or not would be the test, would be the way the European Court of Human Rights would approach this, and that's a more difficult case.
Mm. Yeah, it became there was an issue back that some the Brits probably remember about the leak of the information from the parliamentary expenses, which led to the big scandal here. And I believe I'm right in saying that the Times turned down the opportunity to run that on that very basis, because the information they pretty soon gathered had been stolen, and they took a judgment about whether or not they could, use that stolen information. I think subsequently they might have regretted not doing it, but that is definitely. For me, personally speaking, I think that if you know that the person involved is out for financial gain, which I think in this case, I don't know what the journalists at Der Spiegel or whatever knew when they were first approached, but I think you need, and we did this. You try and understand who the source is. If you know who the source is, and Der Spiegel knew who the source was, in a John Doe case, more difficult because you've got the information's out there, and what do you do? But we used to test our sources, and also in the old days we would turn down things that we knew were stolen. If it was someone had stolen paperwork, they'd gone in and stolen paperwork, we wouldn't use it because we knew that it was stolen. But nowadays, with computers and the circulation of this information, we seem to have lost that moral compass, and we seem to be moving into another realm where it's just a free-for-all. Once it's out there, we don't make any judgment on that. I don't know whether I agree with that. Maybe if I was still a journalist, I might have a different view. Maybe that's what's happened. And this certainly was some of my friends, very close friends of mine on the Sunday Times who are involved with Pinto. And we've had kind of big debate about this, and they said, oh, we didn't know who he was, we didn't know, about his antecedents. But I just think that we have a moral duty really to try and find out where the source of this information is coming from. Anybody else want to take a pot shot at me?
What's the timeline of him releasing publicly information with respect to the extortion intent?
So there was a lot of information released up to the point where he asked for the money, and then it's.
I mean, did he ask for money, and then when he didn't receive it, did he release information out of anger or?
I don't know whether you'd say out of anger. There was a bunch of information released, but I would say that the substantial revelations came after the initial contact and asking for money. But there's been a huge amount of information that came out after those initial 30 documents that led up to the contact. Anybody else? No? Well, thanks very much for your attention anyway. And as I say, for me, it was kind of an interesting one because as a former journalist now in sort of involved in this kind of investigation, you do investigate work for clients. You don't really pick the clients. Sometimes you turn them down because you don't think that you want to work for them. But then you come to it from the point of view that everyone deserves a defence and all that sort of stuff, and you're working for lawyers and things like that. So it's a different. You come to it from a different place than I did do as a journalist, where perhaps maybe as a journalist, you like to sort of have a go at big business. You like to have a go at governments and all those things, and certainly you're always on the lookout for that sort of stuff. But then I think I have taken quite a moral view in this, because I just think that we shouldn't be pressing the button and say it's okay if you've got computer skills and you can break into whoever you fancy, then go ahead and do it, and then there'll always be someone out there who'll be interested. I think that's a slightly sort of dubious place to be, and in the end it's an arms race, isn't it? Because the companies and the governments are building increasing firewalls and trying to shut down the gaps in their systems. And the hackers are becoming ever more sophisticated. I have a state-sponsored on the one extreme, and kind of some guy in his bedroom at the other. I think we should be saying this is not really a world we want to live in.
He's doing a pretty good job at defending himself with the help of Otto. I mean, I'm glad I heard this, because in the media he is depicted as a hero at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, obviously. He's captured people's imagination with a story. If you're interested in football, he's captured the imagination. He's shown up, some of the kind of things that were going on in football that, look very, very dubious. But I'm not sure that I believe this is the right way to expose it. I think that there does seem to need to be an investigation in football, and we already know about FIFA and all those other things. But I'm not sure that we should be countenancing computer hackers going in and stealing information like this.
Any idea of how much is risking?
I'm sorry?
How much is he risking as a sentence?
I don't know. They're talking quite a long, I think 10 years or something, aren't they talking about? But I've no idea. And I've got nothing against the guy personally. I kind of don't really want, I just question really that whether or not this is the way we really want to go. And clients come to you as well and say, well, can't you get in their computers? And well, the answer from us is no. But I don't know whether everyone else takes the same view.
Did you find any evidence that journalists pushed him to hack things?
I can't really go into that. No, I can't really go into that. But he started off on his own before he made contact with journalists. Well, absolutely. Well, he did, and he had a willing audience for that. But I think that, for me, it's whether they pushed him or whether they asked him the question, how are you obtaining this information? And is it legitimate? And I think they just turned a blind eye to that because they knew it wasn't legitimate. They knew that he wasn't, working at one of these companies and therefore had access. They knew he was a computer hacker. And so therefore, the fact that they carried on using it once they knew who he was, once they knew what his background was, I think that's really the question, rather than whether they encouraged him.
And the lawyer, who was he? The Portuguese lawyer that was involved in the demands?
Annabel Pinto.
Yeah.
I can't speak really for why he got himself involved in it. It does seem to me to be a slightly extraordinary state of affairs. I think he talks about it, that he was trying to, forgive me if I get this wrong, because I'm just remembering what I was not personally involved in this, but I think he was saying, wasn't he, that he was trying to sort of get his client a job, that he was trying to persuade the people that they were speaking to hire him because he was a very good computer guy. I don't know. Is that plausible? I don't know.
So in the case of the journalists who use the WikiLeaks information set, would you be equally critical, or is it more a question of proportionate public interest?
I think public interest plays a big part, but also, if you're talking about Chelsea Manning, I mean, there you had someone who was an insider who was seeing this come across their desk and thought what they were finding was wrong. That's a different thing from Chelsea Manning being someone on the outside and breaking into the computer system and then disseminating that information. Because they've taken a moral stand, a moral stand, haven't they? They know that what they're going to do is going to cause them all sorts of trouble. They're breaking the Official Secrets Act or whatever, but they've done it because they believe that what they're doing is right. Whereas if you set out to break into somebody's house, then that's, you before you've found the thing that you want to expose, you're doing something wrong.
I'm having a bit of trouble following your moral compass here, Jason.
This is maybe because you know me too well.
No, well, I don't know. I mean, you seem to be suggesting that it's the way the information is obtained, but actually, is it not really about what the information is and then what is done with it, rather than whether it's hacked, whether it's an insider, whether it's somebody breaking in? I mean,
No, I don't subscribe to that. I think that if someone sets out to break into a system and steal information, then before they know that there's something in there that needs to be exposed, that they've already broken the law.
but if what they find is public interest, then probably
But they shouldn't be breaking in the first place. That's what I'm saying. I think that they shouldn't be breaking in the first place.
I think it's what you do with it. I mean, it's the fact that he's got something which is not necessarily public interest, but he's used for private interest, which is him to extort people. That's the issue with this guy. So, I mean, if he'd been working on the inside of any of these organisations, it would make no difference. He then takes it and then uses it to try and extort people. That's where the wrong is, sure.
But
Speculative hacking there, so to jump in. Because that's opening up, that's justifying hacking of absolutely anyone on the basis that there may be something there in the public interest. I'm not justifying any hacking in any way, shape, or form. I'm trying to understand clearly what your moral position is, and I'm not sure I've got that.
well, it's that. It's the fact that we shouldn't be encouraging people to hack just because on the basis that they might find something that is either it should be exposed or is just interesting. Because that's precisely, looking back to journalism, that's precisely what the phone hacking, British phone hacking inquiry is all about. That they were targeting individuals who are interesting, they're politicians or they're celebrities or whatever, and then they're trying to find out what it is they're doing and then disseminating that information. But the actual fact that they were listening into their voicemails in the first place was against the law. So however, and this is the whole cod facts argument from the Guardian, isn't it? About well, it's okay if we did it, but if the Sun did it, then it's illegal. I don't get that. If you're breaking the law, then to start with, on the basis that you might find out something, then to me that's wrong.
So is it morally appropriate for someone like Edward Snowden to reveal what he came across? Or are we saying that, someone in his position is ultimately in the wrong, or is, is he doing what he thinks is right? But in his position, really, regardless of what he thinks is right, he should not be revealing the secrets of the country.
But I'm just saying that Snowden is in a different place. Snowden, Catherine Gunn, we were talking about, that those people were legitimately had access to some of the material that they then disseminated, that what they thought was going on was wrong, and maybe people have different views whether or not those people should have leaked what they leaked, but at least they were they had legitimate access to it. They were morally motivated to reveal that information. They didn't start out just thinking, I'd like to find out what's going on at Man City, so I'm going to use my computer to break into their computer and find out what Man City are up to. That's totally different from somebody. If the person who'd revealed the issues at Man City was working at Man City and it came across their desk and thought this should be exposed, or somebody else involved in that, the transfers or whatever, thought that this should be revealed, that's one thing. But this is something different. This is someone who's set out to break in somewhere and just see what they find, and then use that to their own ends. That's where my issue is, and so that illegal activity is one thing, but I think as well that us as professionals, journalistic or investigators or whatever, we have some kind of we should have some kind of moral response to that. If someone says to you, I've just broken into this guy's house and this is what I found, it'd be really useful to your client or to your newspaper or for your readers, I just don't think that we should be questioning that.
But this is really a question for the journalist. If someone took files from his office, which is not allowed, which is under criminal aspects not allowed, or hacking, if the documents are true and not fakes, not from the perspective of the person who's a whistleblower or a hacker, but from the journalist side.
Yeah.
What would you expect?
But I think the journalist should ask what's the source, how come this guy's got this information? Because as I say, in the past, when before computers, because I'm that old, when someone came to you with something and said, look, I've got this information, and and it turned out that it had been stolen because someone had their bag snatched or something, which happened, you didn't run the story, you didn't do the story. But now in this world where there's a pressure because the information's flying about and all that, we've sort of lost that kind of ability to take a step back and say, oh, hang on a second, should we really be running this? However good the information is, it's not like it's exposing genocide or something, is it? It's like it's business issue. And should we not be asking where it's come from? That's my problem with it.
Are you aware of any claims against the journalists anywhere?
I'm not aware. No, I'm not aware. Max.
So the story changes, right? I mean, your story is not the data, but the release of it. So presumably you're not able to write this story now. It hasn't done it in a different capacity, but that would have been your story. The role of use and the dissemination.
I would hope. It's difficult to put myself in that position because, obviously, you're under pressure, aren't you, from all sorts of places. But I would hope that we would have taken a view if the information we believe was stolen, that we wouldn't have done it. And that, in the same way the Times decided not to run the parliamentary leak. But then again, the Times probably would take a different view now if someone came to them with that information. So it's kind of I'm out on a limb here, really, I suppose.
Should you write this story up? You can't be bound by one.
What, this story? No, I would. I mean, I'm talking to you, and it's probably bad enough, isn't it? But
We can only tell there have been discussions over weeks with lawyers and externals if it is possible to use the material or not.
I don't know. Most of it's in the public domain. I just sort of giving my perspective on it. Really, I think is the point.
So it seems to me Julian Assange would fall on the wrong side of the moral argument because he did use information provided by hackers.
I mean, bizarrely, that's an argument we had, you know, a long time back in the day. I think it depends on where the still think it depends on where the information is coming from, and you know, if you've broken into broken in somewhere.
Well, for the DNC information, I think he used information from other hackers.
Yeah, I mean, I say it's a very wide debate, but one that I kind of feel quite strongly about. That I think we need to sort of pause really and think: do we want to be like this?
I'm going to give you my views from a legal standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think the balance of interest will be, you know, the importance of the crime, as far as the journalists are concerned. I'm not talking. Ito is going for it, right? But as far as the journalists are concerned, it's the crime. Did they know? What did they know? On the one side, and then the public interest to know, the right of the public to know. And my feeling, just like this, is that there is a public interest here. That is quite important, actually, because I mean, football is not, you know, let's say it's not isolating.
Yeah.
It's a very, I mean, it's something so important in our societies that I think that if there were claims against journalists, I think they would prevail. I think that, you know, the claims would be turned down.
I'm not here to advocate prosecution of journalists. That's the last thing I'd want. But I just think that journalists and, you know, and all of us really who are involved in receiving this kind of information, that we ought to be taking a slightly different view and asking the question, you know, where is it come from, and you know, why are we being given it? And I'm not sure. I mean, I can imagine in an editorial meeting, presented with this material, that it would be quite a difficult argument to have. But certainly, I'm not advocating prosecution of journalists, but I'm just asking. I'm really just saying, you know, maybe we ought to pause and think about what we're doing.
Well, this question goes to lawyers, actually. You know, are we using that kind of information in our cases? That's a question for us as well. So it's not.
Yeah, and I include like investigators, lawyers. I think I include it with all of us. But you know, and it's a difficult question. But it's like these data dumps are a new thing, and nobody really is isn't really kind of giving anyone a proper answer and what, you know, where the line should be drawn. But I'm saying I'm comparing it to breaking into someone's house and saying, well, you wouldn't countenance that. You know, whoever they were, really.
I mean, at the same time, earlier you did say, you know, it's not Jensen, right? So you are admitting that there is a sort of scale here between public interest and the use of the information. And say, for example, Mr. Pinto had hacked a computer in China and exposed by accident, or, you know, without intending to, the genocide of Uyghur people or whatever. Suddenly, would that then be acceptable to use by a journalist, even though the information had been hacked?
I think that's absolutely the right question, and I think that's got to be part of the debate. But I think that we ought to also be thinking. We ought to also have to think about where the information is coming from as well as part of that. But as you say, if it's exposing some kind of like massive global wrongdoing, then you know that. I mean, that I'm sure that's the argument. I'm sure that's the discussions that were going on in the various newsrooms that were getting this information. And you know, I'm not trying to second guess that. I'm just saying, from my perspective, it just seems to me to be wrong to be encouraging someone to, without any real knowledge and understanding of what they think they're going to find, just to have a quick look and then to sort of disseminate that information.
Are you aware? Was that happening? There was a back and forth.
I don't know. There's some stuff in the media about before he was named or whatever, being, you know, meeting the journalist from Der Spiegel. I think they wrote about it. So there was some kind of discussions going on, but I've no idea what they knew about him or
But he had hacked the information in one go, and then tapped it around. He hadn't been going back and forth.
Well, as I said before, there was evidence of further attempts, and of course, there's also a question about there are a bunch of organisations, and my knowledge is about a small number of those because those are the ones that I was involved with. There was a bunch of other organisations, who were also, faced similar efforts to grab information. Not all the information comes from the same source, and it's like. And it's not really that clear, I don't think, where Ground Zero is. Who the first organisation was that was breached. But that would, once you had information from one source and you could see that they were discussing things with another source, you could go and try them, and then then you went and there were various and then there were also football teams, things like that were also looked at. So there's not just one organisation here. And the information just doesn't come from the same place. Okay. Well, thanks very much for listening.